welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft Podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me in the booth is a man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, sir?
I'm under a lot of pressure now.
Under pressure? Go on.
Oh, see, normally at this stage of the season, you're sort of ticking along okay, but I'm 9-0, you see, so it's all of a sudden every game's important now because you've got to carry on the streak.
That's
I can't
true.
afford to drop one, so now I'm just fixated on every match.
Absolutely. So you're thinking 2007 Patriots, is it? Where they go on undefeated and then get beaten by the Giants?
Oh, I'm thinking Undertaker. See how many years I can drag this out for.
Yeah, nice. 9-0. Very good. Impressive. We said on Facebook Live it was going to be a pretty wild weekend. It didn't disappoint. Some pretty interesting scores. I use interesting as a very liberal use. Some crazy scores. Some fairly expected scores. Good to see some studs coming back in Folau and McKenzie, but I guess the big talking point is the injuries and the carnage this weekend. So we'll review Game Week 3 for Fantasy Rugby Draft. We'll kind of look at the injuries, see who may benefit from those injuries, and see if we can get some sort of plan in place for those that have been affected by these quite significant fantasy players. Before we do that, though, subscribe to the podcast. If you want to get it a few hours earlier before everyone else, then make sure you subscribe. Otherwise, you'll be at the whims of iTunes and when they actually publish it in a search. We actually got a review, Mossman, you'll be pleased to know, from South Africa.
Well, I'll be pleased depending on the content of the review.
That's a good point, actually. I probably should have brought that up earlier. No, it's from the Old Egg in South Africa. Great information. Nice addition to the game. Cheers, Old Egg. Which is a nice, simple, straightforward review. If it's the guy that I'm thinking of, I say guy. If it's the person I think of on Twitter, he's pretty funny. He's got some amusing stuff, and he's been trying to tap into the Cheetahs injury staff recently with Sergio Peterson and how long he was out for. So, very good. Thanks. Keep them coming. We like to see the reviews. They're fun, but they also serve a purpose. So that increases our reach or increases our ranks, and people will listen to the podcast, download it more, and by that end, then we get more information from folks, from people that are closer to the team or closer to the players themselves. So many updates that you hear on this Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast is because we have managers that are pretty close to the team and their situations, or flat with X, Y, Z. So keep it coming, keep the reviews coming. We love it. Actually, before we get into the actual reviews of the games, mate, I played this game with you middle of the week, I think it was. I thought I'd play it with the listeners too, or at least I'll start at the start of the podcast and preface the question and say, who are the 5 players to be owned in every single league? So they've got an ownership percentage of 100%. And I'll give you the first one. The first one is probably not too surprising for many folks, but it's Jordie Barrett. So he's 100% owned. So at the end, a couple of names in here that will probably surprise you. I know they surprised you, Mossman. You went through a list quite a while. But have a think of those 4 other players. Right, Chiefs Hurricanes. I didn't actually see this. I was stuck in traffic with hosing down with the rain. What were your thoughts? Where do you want to start? Do you want to start at injuries, the game itself, players that played well, didn't play well?
I think what I really want to do is just focus on particular situations that I think are relevant to what's coming up this weekend. Mm-hmm. Because I just feel in some ways that reviewing what happened in the actual game is really not a lot of help to anybody. No. So I think the key ones here, I think, are some of the things that Dave Rennie's been saying immediately after this game, talking about potentially resting some players. Mm. And I've got a sneaky suspicion that maybe Cruden might be one of them. And we might see... So the reason Cruden wasn't kicking, apparently had a sore foot, and that's why McKenzie was kicking. But I've just got a sneaky feeling that we might see McKenzie at 10, and Cruden might be rested. And I think we can be pretty sure, because James Lowe's going to be rested as well, apparently a very minor back injury, that we're going to see Sean Stevenson in there. So Sean Stevenson's a player that I'm interested in. I think he's someone that's going to be, should be, a big pickup on the waivers coming forward. And I also think if you're relying on Cruden, you might need to start looking at a plan B.
It's interesting you say that. You and I actually haven't spoken since the weekend, but I've been sensing that in the tea leaves as well. There's been a few more articles this week about how McKenzie wants to play first 5 long term and how the ABs see him as a future 10 as well. And where there's smoke, there's fire, I always feel. And I wondered if there was something, somewhat of a change coming in there. And perhaps you're right. Against the Rebels this weekend, I think it is, right?
It is, yeah.
So, yeah, your eyes light up a little bit there.
Yeah, I suppose I looked at it slightly differently. I didn't look at it from a sort of the future or the All Black perspective. No. I just looked at it as I get the feeling that they're looking at this as an ideal, help yourself to whatever it is you're drinking there, an ideal time to rest these players. They won't say it out loud, but they're thinking it's a relatively easy fixture, and when your star name, one of your star names is carrying injury, seems like an ideal time to give him a rest.
So Tim Nano-Williams got injured as well, didn't he? So he's out for 6 weeks or so, is that right?
That's right, yeah. No, dislocated shoulder, so they're saying 6 weeks. And so you've got him, you've got Lowe, obviously, that are out, and so enter Sean Stevenson, who, like I said, good pickup.
I'm a little bit concerned they're going to have Stephen Donald playing 12. Do you get the impression that that's what's going to happen, and Anton Leonard-Brown pop out one?
I think there's a pretty strong chance that'll happen, yeah.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of skip passes. There'll be a lot of them too.
Love it. What about the Hurricanes themselves? So I guess let's start at the top. The big injury with Milner-Skudder out for 6 to 8 weeks. It's going to be one of those where they're probably not going to rush him back, but at the same time they're going to have one eye on the Lions that want to get a decent amount of game time in. And it was a little bit difficult to understand exactly how it was going to pan out because Vince Aso picked up an injury roughly at the same time. Have you heard anything about Vince Aso's injury?
No, they haven't said anything about him, which is either because the reporters turn up to the press conference and don't care because it's Vince Aso, or because it's not serious. And I'm actually unsure about which of those two options it is. Yeah,
that's right. So I think for Jordie Barrett owners that drafted them in the first round, you know who you are. Congratulations. This is probably going to get a pretty big payback pretty early on because I think he'll go into 15. You got any argument there?
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah.
And on the wing, if Vince Aso drops out, so Corey Jane's still out for probably another 3 more weeks, I think. Ben Lamb is probably packing groceries somewhere. Wes Goosen is probably going to come on the wing, would you thought?
Yes, I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
All right.
He's next cab off the rank.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going as well. So, I mean, you can't do anything with Jordie Barrett. I was going to go through some ownership percentages and some players to pick up in other areas, but Jordie Barrett's owned in 99% of leagues, which is not going to surprise anybody. But what do you do with Milner-Skudder? So 6 to 8 weeks. I guess folks that are playing it for the first time, you'll understand now what an actual coach has to go through. You need to make a decision now whether you bring someone else into your team, whether you actually cut Milner-Skudder or whether you just have him on your bench. And I think I can probably speak for you, Mossman, and say you would hold on to him for that 6 to 8 weeks.
I think that's probably fair. I guess the other thing, and we've probably said it before as well, is it'll depend a lot on your situation as well. If you're 3-0 and 6 weeks might not seem like such a bad thing, you probably feel like you can get away with that.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
And also how strong you are at that position as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to get into as well. So you do need to have a look at your squad. I'm going to say this across all of the injuries, but you've lost the luxury of carrying two of a position like a half-back lock or a front row. I know some people do actually carry that for whatever reason. I certainly don't. I'm not sure. I don't think you particularly do either, Mossman, but you've now lost the luxury, I think, of being able to do that. You should really only be owning the starting positions for each of those positions. But I think it's also a bit of a knock-on that players like Charlie Ngatai and John O'Macaulay and those types of players that you were kind of hitting and hoping on, you may need to start making some pretty tough calls there. And it may even go to like Sean McMahon type levels as well. You need to be really kind of rationalising who you're going to have on that bench. And I think for most managers, that'll be a backup loose forward, maybe a backup fly half, and then you've got to think the split that you want. One of them's going to be Milner-Skudder, and the other one, what are the other three going to make up from? So there's some tough decisions to make, and it's exactly what you said. It depends on, A, what the options are that you're picking up, and B, whether you've originally got any backup in your squad as well.
Yep, absolutely. And of the three names that you mentioned there, I mean, I said it on the Facebook live session. Sad day last week. I did cut Charlie Ngatai. I've also got rid of Jonah Macaulay. I think there's no point in holding either of those two now. Sean McMahon I have benched or managed to pick him up and have stashed, and I think he's still worth a stash because in terms of time frame, it's actually talking about round 6, which obviously we're coming up round 4, not far away.
Yeah, that's why I kind of said almost McMahon, because I'm owning him. I have him on my bench, and I'm stuck him out this long as well.
Sure, yeah.
Anything more you want to talk about for the Chiefs Canes? It's quite a spiteful encounter, but for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it, but that's probably for personal reasons. Yep. There's probably not a whole lot else to say. I mean, I think we said that you probably wouldn't learn much from playing in these kind of conditions, and yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it was a good match, good intense match. Just wasn't much of a spectacle for most owners, but I did like at the end that they were going to kick the ball out, and then someone came on and was it the water boy or whatever, and said knock that 3 over so that they can get outside the bonus point.
Sweep the leg, Johnny. Yeah. That was I enjoyed that a lot.
It was. I mean, people kind of may overlook that, but the New Zealand Conference is going to come down to bonus points. It literally, there's going to be a point in it somewhere along the line, and it's going to be quite important. Okay, Brumbies Force. Your boy, come good. Jimmy likes what Jimmy sees.
He did like what he see. Yeah. Finally, it probably wasn't the match necessarily that I expected him to, but he's one of those guys. He's good enough, and he plays in a decent team, and yeah, he'll have matches like this. Yeah,
that's right. I think another strong game from Howard. I actually didn't see this one either. I was again stuck in traffic. It was a long drive, but just looking at the points themselves, he put in a good performance. Was that reflective on the pitch?
Yeah, scored a try, showed more of the dancing feet, the hot stepping that he did last week. I think he looks a good prospect.
Okay. The only bit I saw out of this game was the interview with Spate that they had after he scored that try. Did you see that?
Yeah, that's a new innovation. he was sucking in the big ones, and I mean, struggling to make out pretty much anything that he said.
I couldn't tell what he said. I had to listen to it over and over again. It's like that heart rate monitor that they've got, right, in the box now. I'm not sure that's actually linked to anything because it's just flat lines for most of the time.
Well, that might just be Stephen Larkham, though.
That's true. That is his knock, right, Bernie.
Bernie.
What do you make of kind of? I was expecting a little bit more out of the kind of John O'Lance, Chance Penny type players. Is this? I don't know. The Brumbies played pretty good defence. You just had to look at that against the Crusaders in week 1. Are they going to be? Is this their kind of MO that they're going to be in fairly tight games and keep you quite restricted, or did the Force just play pretty badly?
No, it's a tough one. I just think that John O'Lance will sort of continue to be a little bit hit and miss. Chance Penny still scored, but the Brumbies are. I think you're right. They're sort of very organised. I think the Brumbies front row is still going to be good. I mean, a lot of people were like, well, they've lost all this personnel. They lost Stephen Moore. Maybe they'd go downhill. I still think they'll be one of the top front rows. They'll be up there. They still love them more.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's exactly that. Stephen Moore we thought would have a significant input, but leaving would have a significant input to how well the Brumbies actually went, but they seem to still be picking up points, and I guess a little bit comes from Scott CO as well. But I guess the only play, just looking at the first page of all the point scorers for this week, and there is only Jimmy on that. He's right at the bottom, so it probably tells you as much as you need to know about this game. Do you want to focus on anything more from this?
I don't think there is actually much else to say, to be honest.
Okay, all right. Let's have a look at Blues Highlanders then. This is a pretty frustrating game to watch. It just didn't particularly click. I think we were expecting a kind of a typhoon type weather of the night before, but it cleared up a little bit. Is that right? It looked okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the majority of it, I think conditions were fine. I mean, I think it was humid because it was still quite warm. And I guess, look, I mean, I'm not blaming conditions on mistakes in this game, is I guess what I'm saying.
Okay, all right. What about, so Chaz Famuini getting injured just before kick-off obviously has a pretty significant impact to the Blues front row, but Khaleesi on Twitter was musing an interesting one that I thought. When Moala plays 12, that's going to have quite a significant impact on Rieko Ioane, and actually further outside as well. Bring back Piers Francis is basically the call to Ioane's fantasy relevance. Do you think there's anything in that, or do you think it's just the type of game that it was and it was a bit messy?
Well, to be fair, Rico's been kind of anonymous for the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So that includes a game where Piers Francis was in there.
True. Yep, that's true.
Which makes, in some ways, the Rebels game look like the outlier. I think it's probably more a team performance as much as anything else. But I guess the thing that I guess the talking point or the situation that I'm interested with this game is potentially the benching of the High West and P.S. Francis actually stepping into the 10 shirt, which I think is a strong possibility. So once again, it's the same thing I said for Cruden. If you are an High West owner, I think you need to be looking at your options this week, because I think there's a strong chance that he's not going to be named when the 10 comes out.
Well, that's really interesting. That's going to be there's going to be fly halves buzzing around everywhere on the waiver wire tomorrow morning. Injuries plus also some potential benchings. What about
That's right.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. And of course, the potential solution to your fly half problems, well, there are two of them featured in this match, and obviously one is Francis and the other one is Marty Banks.
So you think it more will be Marty Banks, do you? You don't think it's going to be Fletcher Smith? I thought they might give Fletcher Smith a run. Now, I was kind of 50-50. Marty Banks is a much better bench player. Like, he offers that versatility to be able to cover fullback and outside backs as well as fly half. But he can do that from starting as well. You know, he can drop back once Fletch comes on at 10 if he didn't start. But it sounds like you're leaning towards Banks.
Yeah, it's funny actually now that you say that, because it kind of twigged something in my memory where I think I read somewhere that they were talking about giving him a go, but I think that might have been an earlier match.
I'm leaning Fletcher, just and it probably again is Schoolage. It's probably not helping, but yeah, he's certainly he's another one from the Straven Red Academy fly halves. But I have a feeling they may put him in this week. Now, I did see an article on One News tonight saying that Marty Banks may get the nod just purely on the fact that he played against the Hurricanes in Wellington before, which obviously Fletcher Smith can't lay claim to. But I just had a feeling they might go for that. But it doesn't, for fantasy, it makes it really difficult to try and push your chips in one way or the other. And I think there's also another position that I'll talk about when we get to the Sharks, where it's not 100% clear who is going to be replacing him anyway. But Lima Sopoaga, we haven't actually heard a time frame, have we? We've heard him tweet out saying he's off for a few weeks.
Yeah, which I think it'll be sort of 4 to 6.
Yep, I think so too. Yep, that was kind of what I had in the back of my mind as well. I think there's a bye after 5 weeks or something like that. After they played 4 games and then the bye. Or something
yeah,
like
that's
that.
right. They actually have the bye and then they have the Sunwolves, I think.
Oh, so 2 byes.
So 2 byes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
They have the bye and then they have the sayonara. So it's an awful joke, but anyway.
Naholo. Talk me through Naholo, because we kind of danced around a little bit around it last week. That he always seems to be, he gets up off the ground really gingerly almost every time he takes a run, but it looked pretty bad.
Yeah, it looked bad because there was no one around him when it happened. There were players around him, but it wasn't a contact injury. It was quite a strange one. I sort of rewound it and looked at it a couple of times, almost like he kicked the ground, and that somehow did it. But anyway, I've said in the past that I didn't think players were necessarily injury prone, but I'm starting to change my mind about him because he's got a really strong track record of injuries, and you're absolutely right. He seems to pick up niggles even within games, and in recent times anyway, the number of times he's actually come off the field with something, I don't know if he's got a low pain threshold or something. I wouldn't say that to his face, obviously.
So who do we think so let's assume that he is out for say 3 or 4 weeks with a ping. Who do we think might be coming onto the wings? And we've got people in the mix. Obviously, Buckman's probably likely still going to stay 15 by the sounds of it. But you also got Jet Li and Osborne, but they're both left wingers. Is there a chance we see Fadders?
I think there could be, yeah. I obviously Osborne's, as you say, left winger, but we don't know how versatile these guys are, do we?
No.
Really? Does Jet Li played on the right? Can he? We don't know.
I think he just likes because the Lee is quite skinny and number 11 is quite skinny. I think he just likes how it lines up against each other. Having a 4 on top of the eye or below the eye just doesn't work for him.
Yeah,
he's into straight lines.
No, I like the logic. Yep. Yep. That's groundbreaking analysis. I like it.
Absolutely. But so with Matt Fadders, I think a few folks have been asking exactly where he is. I believe there's something he's not injury related, at least at this stage, but he shouldn't be too far away by all accounts from the team. And I just wonder if he may come in a little bit of an SOS call at this point and jump onto that right wing. Fekitoa, better. I guess there was a low bar.
I didn't think he was that much better. The try he scored was pretty lucky. In between times, there was still some pretty poor decision making and dodgy hands, but
terrible hands at the moment. What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know.
Neither do I. Dear me. All right, okay. Anything more from this match?
No, there isn't. But I suppose Milani Nanai did make it onto the field and looked okay.
Don't get that. I'm going to go to my grave saying that, aren't I? Goodness
pretty
gracious.
much. So I guess. I guess at some point what we need to do, though, is actually say to people, well, here's what we think you need to do with your fly half conundrum. And what we've done is probably muddy the waters a little bit. We're saying, well, we've got a problem with E-Hire. We think Cruden's out. We don't know about Marty Banks. We've got Fletcher Smith in the equation. I suppose should we talk about the Sharks now?
Yeah, go. Yep.
Because we're going to have to at some point actually offer some people some advice, right?
Yep. So I've got this problem because I've got Lima. Right, and I don't have any fly half on my bench because I've stuck with my theory of I can pick up someone else at that replacement level and not actually have to carry him on the bench.
Right, and I'm assuming that replacement level is now below, say, Hawara, for instance, who's probably he's better than that and would probably be picked up.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay.
Let me go. I'll tell you what. If you got 2 seconds, just muse yourself, and I'll tell you exactly what my pending waivers are and who's my number one.
Okay. Well,
so for my number one, I've got Garth April.
Okay, so that's the way you're going. That's where you think it's going to be.
That's where I'm hedging my bet, as Pat Lambie is out a bit longer than Sopoaga.
Yeah, he's like eight weeks or something. Yeah.
That's right. And I don't think they're going to thrust Bosch into that role straight off the bat. I mean, they've got Clement Prochino in there, for crying out loud. That's how much they wanted to wrap Bosch in cotton wool. So Garth April's been there and done that before. I think he'll slot in there. He wasn't on the bench because he doesn't necessarily fit into that bench. If you've got Curwin Bosch, you've got the ability to have a half-back and then a midfield and then an outside-back like him in there. So that was the reason why you didn't see him as a replacement. But there's doubt there too. You know, it could well be Curwin Bosch comes in and does that role and kicks the goals. So I'm taking it as I've got Garth April, then I've got Fletcher Smith, and then I've got a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. But that's the way I'm going.
Okay.
And I'm assuming Marty Banks will still be there if it's not Fletcher, if someone else gets Fletcher and Garth in front of me.
Sure. Okay. And are you doing this predicated on the upcoming fixture against the Kings, or you think this is your solution for Lima moving forward? Because after the Kings game, the Sharks they've got Cheetahs,
they're okay.
Lions,
okay.
Jags, Rebels. I suppose it's not too bad. There's a few local derby games and then home and away against the Jags, and they play the Force. So yeah, I guess there's something to be said for that.
That's what I have. I've literally got both pages of the Sharks fixtures and the Highlanders fixtures open.
Yeah, so right.
And that's what I was looking at, and it was down looking at those Rebels and Force games as well, and Hawara is home and away. The Lions will be a big scoring match.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect maybe the Cheetahs might be as well. And if I looked at the Highlanders, they have obviously a couple of local derbies in there as well. So the Hurricanes, and then they've got the Blues. They do get to play the Sayanaras though on the 22nd. But I wonder if, as you alluded to, maybe they give Lima a bit of a rest there. Not too sure as well. But I just looked at the Brumbies as well. We saw what they did against the Force. They're a bit tighter away. I just thought a better run of fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, to me, that Fletcher Smith and Marty Banks is kind of a 55-45 split towards Fletcher, but I'm not confident, right? I'm a little bit more confident that Garth April is going to be there because he was that 10 when he came in for the last year and a bit when Lambie's been down.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the reasoning seems fair.
Yeah, who knows though, really. Let's actually see where it comes down.
Yeah, I mean, where would you fit Francis into that?
Yeah, up until you spoke about 10 minutes ago about that, it wasn't on my radar. Genuinely wasn't on my radar. And
I guess the thing is that your reasoning still sound because we're talking about two players that we know are injured and therefore out versus speculation about a potential benching, which is, makes April obviously still a stronger prospect.
Would it surprise you to hear that Piers Francis is 90% owned?
Not particularly, because he was ranked quite high.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. So I don't think I understand why the question was there, and it makes sense because we've got to evaluate it against the other options that are coming in this week. But I'm just not sure you're going to be in that position to either get West or Francis.
Sure. Okay.
But no, I understand.
No, that's fair.
We'll go back to the running order. We'll get back onto the Sharks once we get there. Reds Crusaders. Geez, they're making it hard for themselves, aren't they? But let's look at the positives. So I thought Fetu Douglas was strong again, and again, not just from a ball carrying, but from a fantasy rugby draft perspective, looks good.
Yep. Yeah, no, he does look good. If you're scratching around for a loose foot, he's probably worth a look.
Jordan Taufua just scratches my head. I thought he had cost that game. There's a little bit of a weak slap, if you will, or a push punch, whatever they call it. Probably didn't even clock on much, but I thought that we had, the Crusaders had the metal on the Reds quite significantly at that point in time, and I thought that might have been the turning point to actually to lose that momentum. But fair play, and fair play to Mitch Hunt as well, knocking that kick over at the end. Interestingly, though, that they'd been saying up to this point, up till when Mo Underga got injured, that Marty Mack, the inference was that Marty Mack was a better goal kicker than Mitchell Hunt. But when he was on the pitch, it was still Mitchell Hunt taking the goal kicks. So I wondered if it was a bit of okay, it's your team, you're taking the goal kicks, and we can't pick and choose when we take it away from you. But just an interesting point to note. So I guess the big one is Israel Dagg's injury. It didn't sound as though it was as bad as they thought it was going to be the next morning. Razor said, sounds like he's moving a little bit freer, but they're going to have an MRI and check that out. I guess from a fantasy perspective, any idea where they're going to play, how they're going to play? And I guess it comes back to David Havili might be the guy coming back in there. Is that what you've heard as well?
Well, that's what they've done this season when there've been injuries, and obviously Seta is looking like he'll probably miss a couple of weeks as well. Just trying to think. I can't remember exactly what it is that he's done to himself, but
I'm not sure about Tamanivalu because I heard Razor say he's a quick healer and he's walking around, he's running around a little bit more. He wasn't dressed for training on Monday, but it didn't sound like they were ruling him out for this week at least anyway. So I think there is a chance that he may play. But yeah, obviously you've got to keep a pretty close watching brief on that. I think it was a hamstring actually.
It is, yeah. I'm just looking at that now. So I think I might have read the same article. It was actually, I think that was Tamanivalu that they said was walking freely or freer the next day, not Dagg.
Okay, all right. So yeah, there's a chance he may play, but I think yesterday I had George Bridge fairly high up on my list of waiver requests, but he's kind of bumped down a little bit now. I think he's probably still worth owning and bringing in, but I'm not sure how long Tamanivalu would be out for. And I think they saw enough from Digby Ioane to have him on the left, so I guess it all just comes down to Tamanivalu's and whether he's fit or not. Isaiah Parise for the Reds. He looked okay. He got quite a bunch of points. It looks like he could beat a man in a phone box, hot stepper. But no, pretty impressive. Did you think so?
I thought he was okay. Yeah, I think he's also one of those players though that you're watching more closely than other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Every time he does something half decent, there's a bit of confirmation bias in there somewhere. I kind of looked at the Reds and just thought to myself, well, what they would do without Karevi. He just seems to be. He's obviously the main man. He's the go-to guy. He just seems to provide any kind of X factor that they're actually capable of producing almost.
I know. No, he's immense, isn't he? He's just so good. What about on the flip side of that, Tuvi Ying, there's a Yang, K-Magic, Carmichael Hunt. He looks pretty poor, so that experiment might be over for fantasy rugby draft.
Yeah, a player that you can drop. I think he's scored 7-8 points through 3 weeks, so if you drop him and he comes up with some points, don't feel like you missed the points. I think we've kind of seen that he is what he is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move. Do you want to talk about this game anymore? From a fantasy perspective, I don't think there's much you can do for Dagg because Havili is fairly high owned as well. He's going to be
I think the questions will be the ones that you've already answered, and probably is Mitchell Hunt now looking? I mean, you could argue the last two performances haven't been great, but obviously they've been wins. Would you change a winning team? Will they stick with him? Has he been good enough? I mean, kicking a winning goal, you'd probably be hard done by if you got yanked by that. But at the same time, I'm sure they're not happy with the way they're playing. How much of that is down to him, and do you think there's a possibility of a change there?
Yeah, I do. So I wasn't necessarily too critical of him the first week, and a lot of people saw how when Marty Mack came on that the team seemed to click a little bit better against the Highlanders. I didn't really put that down to that. I thought they were tiring. This is a little bit of an opposite situation where it wasn't the Crusaders weren't actually playing well. They didn't have all the possession, and the Reds were for 50 minutes playing decent rugby. And when Marty Mack came on, he did make a decent, quite a big difference to that team as well. And it may be because Mitchell Hunt was switching around to 15 as well, and maybe Bridge isn't that natural 15 than when he came on. So I think there's probably mitigating factors there, but I thought Marty Mack did actually make a bit of a difference, and there is a bigger chance than there was last week that he may actually get a nod. But tough game against the Blues. New Zealand matchup, they're certainly going to want to have that long rake in there, so it all depends if Havili's not fit, they'll play Marty Mack there to be able to have those two pivots, front and the back. Should we jump on to Stormers Kings then? Did you see this match?
I saw bits of it, yeah.
So the one I wanted to talk about it was a player who actually didn't play in this game at all. So Sinatla, he came on the week before and looked okay. I don't remember him picking up an injury, but there was just deathly silence this week about why he wasn't played either in the squad or in the team. Have you got any idea of where he was or what's going on?
No, I don't, and I'm not too bothered. I think he's perhaps in the pre-say category again as one that I think you picked him out as a bit of a bolter, pre-season coming into the season. And so now there's sort of this fixation on why they're not playing him because, I ranked him highly, so he must be good. Yep. Maybe he's actually just not that good.
Three-quarters of South Africa has just got sharpening the knives now.
Well, if they're sharpening the knives, they can do it for the Stormers coach because I'm not the one that's splitting them out of the team.
That's true. So Dylan Lates and Basong were beneficiaries, obviously, of playing against the Kings. They'll do this every week, won't they? They'll score really well. I mean, Basong has proven 50 points a game week.
Dylan Lates is actually a little bit of an underrated player.
He is. Yeah.
I used him in a couple of leagues this week because I actually had some confidence that he could do something against, a relatively poor opposition. So, he's done it before. He's had good seasons. He's just not a household name, obviously, but somebody that, if you can stash him away as your fifth or something outside back, I think it's pretty decent.
Yep, no, that's fair. I guess one guy that we had targeted at the start of at the end of the week on the Facebook Live session was Bob Dupree. We actually had him ranked, certainly I had him ranked higher than Jean-Luc Duplessis before the start of the season. I thought he would get the 10 job. And again,
so did I.
And it is against the Kings, right? But he did look very good.
He did.
He looked really, really good. Flick must have to scratch his head a little bit there about what he wants to actually do.
Which doesn't help us at all.
No, it doesn't. Another 10 situation that's got a question mark. Yeah, you're going to have to be pretty reactive, I think, this week on team news and be very, very close to it. Because I'm not sure people are going to have the luxury of being able to cover both options on a bench was already bereft of some big name players that you're trying to carry. I was going to the other point I wanted to make was Chris Cloutey, you've mentioned him before as well. He looks good. Looks like a loose forward. He's at that breakdown every time. But the one player I thought was an amazing hands to score was Mpipi. Did you see his try at the end? It was all for nothing really. But that kick that came across and he just snatched it out from. It was about 5 meters in touch, and he just snatched it and brought it in, tucked it under his arm, and scored.
No, okay.
Very impressive. But yeah, that's not for much.
Right.
For fantasy.
So probably just one last guy, and that was Dan Duplessis. So for somebody that was on debut, he just looked like he had a lot of confidence. There were some quite good signs there. But as somebody that you picked up probably for just this week or the week just gone and stuck him into your team and now on a bye, you're kind of in that situation where you're thinking, actually, do I want to hold him now or drop him? I guess it depends a little bit on your midfield stocks, but I'm sort of inclined to drop him, even though I liked what I saw.
Yep. There'll be a lot of players doing that. A lot of managers will do that. They had the Kings, right? It's a fairly attractive matchup. Storm was playing well. And so they'll pick up these kind of, exactly what you've just highlighted there, they're kind of average to okay players, but they've got a good matchup, so they go well, and it kind of proved out. So now what do you do? Especially with all these injuries, I think you're going to see them being cut and potentially go and pick up whoever the Sunwolves are playing. Speaking of that, do you want to talk about anything more?
No.
Cool. Cheetahs Sunwolves. Fred Zalinga. He's playing well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he is. I mean, he probably disappointed a little bit just because we'd talked him up so much.
Sure.
But, yeah, I mean, as an overall thing, I think it was fine. It was obviously a much closer game than I'm sure a lot of people were expecting. Certainly than what we were expecting. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Fred didn't disappoint you, didn't let you down.
Most of the Cheetahs actually went okay if you looked at just their points together. But as you say, I think it was a much better performance from the Sunwolves. I'm not entirely sure what it was. Maybe they galvanised a little bit when they've been on tour. But I wanted to talk about one of the players in the Sunwolves. So JJ Tuilagi. What's your view before I kind of cloud what I think might be happening?
You'll have to.
So do you think he is going to be coming in and kicking goals for good? Do you think he was just resting Cripps? Because shot to Emmy started at 15. JJ looks like it's his position, and he looked confident. He was taking the line kicks as well, and he looked pretty good. Do you still think it's Hayden Cripps' job is to kick goals, or do you think now JJ Tuilagi is going to be kicking goals?
No idea.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I thought he looked pretty good, and just taking the kicks to the sideline as well suggested to me that he's going to play a pretty significant role in the Sunwolves. So I've got a request in to add him for a couple of the guys that we've mentioned before that we're going to cut. But I think there's upside there. But Shot to Emmy did play well. He scored that lovely try first up, good handoff. And one of the guys that we got asked about quite frequently during the end of last week was Will Tupou, and he looked pretty good as well. I wonder if there's a suspension coming there, but he did actually look okay. Did you take anything more from this game?
Well, just Fukuoka. I'll get there eventually.
Easy for you to say.
He's sort of the new Yamada. You sort of thought, well, he's done it one week, that's fine, and then he did it another week, and now he's put up 10, 29, and 31 in 3 weeks, and you wouldn't fancy him probably in games against New Zealand teams, although obviously, the first one was against the Canes, but perhaps in away games. But with favourable fixtures, doesn't seem to be any reason why he can't sort of keep doing what he's doing. They just, I've probably highlighted it before, they just go through these periods, don't they, where it's just all-out attack.
Yep.
So I think it's possible to score points when you don't give a shit about defense, and that's kind of like, so they're going to put up points probably in some of the hidings that they take, and he seems to be the beneficiary. I'm not sure, but he might be playing on that Yamada wing where all the plays seem to run to anyway.
Yes, yeah.
So he might almost literally be the new Yamada.
It's true, he does seem to have that really handy knack of the ball following him. And as you say, that was last season as well. A lot of the Sunwolves attack did go down that left, so that's good to me. But yeah, he's really, his ownership percentage has shot up, but he'll be out there on most waiver wise. Sharks Waratahs. So we have kind of touched on the Patrick Lambie injury. It's 2 months, wasn't it? Was that
yes.
what you heard? So it's almost literally the same as last year. Do you hold on to him for the playoff run?
I mean, part of it will come down to fixtures, right? So just looking at who they have got. I don't know if you've still got those in front of you, but they've got, so the Bulls. The last 3 games are Stormers, Bulls, Lions. That's not that encouraging. So that will be your semis and final.
True.
So the week before is the Sunwolves. So that is probably right at the end of that range. So if you're holding him, you're potentially holding him for 1 game.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Which is probably not the ideal scenario, and I don't think most managers would do it. But if
what you could do, I mean, and we've seen people do it in the past, is it becomes this kind of game of chicken, doesn't it? Where Lambie sits on the waiver wire for 6 weeks, and it's about who goes first, who jumps in first, who's like it's when you're running like 5,000, 10,000 meters or something, and it's like who puts the sprint finish on first? Can you last? who goes first? And you end up like they did at the Olympics, where nobody put the sprint finish on, and Nick Willis gets a bronze medal, which is perfect. Yeah,
that works well. One point to note as well is the Sharks are afflicted with the Gameweek 16 as well, so they don't play in that second leg of the semi-final, even when he is back. So there is that factor as well. But yeah, it's a good question. I was holding on to most of the other players, but I guess now there is a case to be said that maybe it isn't worthwhile holding on to Lambie, especially looking at those fixtures and how they're going to play. Okay. What about Cobus Van Fake? So he's on the no-fly list. I'm going to take him off the low-fly list. If the Sharks keep playing like this and they keep playing well at home, he's probably going to be a direct result of that. He's going to profit.
Yeah, scored a long-range try. Still doesn't strike me as a player. We talk about players that make their own shot. He's not that guy.
No.
Definitely not that guy. He'll profit when there's sort of open space or something's provided for him, and that's what he did here. But doesn't sort of beat people in one-on-one situations. Doesn't sort of offload or do a whole lot really.
No, and I think he's a byproduct of Lucanio Am inside him. He's looked really good, and he will do that. Offload and the defenders beaten. He looks pretty good. Really impressed with them thus far. Israel Folau, back to his destructive best. High stepping over everybody.
Yeah, well, if people look at this game, I mean, the fantasy rugby draft as a whole, and think that it's just a series of random events that happen every week, well, you can just point to Folau and say, like, this guy has been doing this for 4 seasons now. So it's completely legit. He's going to put up probably 300 points, and it doesn't really matter how well or badly his team is playing, or necessarily who he's playing against. So it's just, there's just some people you can hang your hat on, and he's one.
And this all happening with Bryce Hegarty at 10. So it's and Simone inside him, who is not playing particularly well as well. I heard Gibbo say before he left, saying that he thought there may need to be a bit of a backline shuffle. Now it looks like there's good news on the Bernard Foley front, and it doesn't sound as serious. It sounds like he's a step closer in the protocol, but let's see that before we get too excited. But it sounds like they weren't particularly happy with the way that was functioning inside them, and that they need to make some changes there. Anything more from this game? So I guess let's just go back to the April point as well. So I have got April at the top of the list in terms of fly halves to pick up, but I've also got Bosch pretty highly picked up as well. So even if April does get that position, I'd be surprised if they put Bosch straight back into the bench again and didn't have him starting over Poitrenault at 15. If he wasn't going to play fly half. So I have Bosch as quite a high pickup as well. And he's only 16% owned, so there's a good chance that you can pick him up on your league. And there is a chance he could be the fly half, could be kicking goals. I don't, if I had to hedge my bet, or if I bet the house on it, I'd say it wouldn't be, but you still need to cater for the scenario where it could actually happen. Do you want to talk about anything more, Sharks Waratahs?
Just probably with the Waratahs, not so much this game. Once again, you mentioned Foley, but another player who's not playing, Jed Holloway. We're interested. I mean, he was due back any time around now. So, are they? Where are the Waratahs? They're back in Australia now, aren't they? They're playing the Brumbies this week. So, obviously, he didn't travel, and therefore, you'd think that if he is fit, and we don't know, then there's a chance that he could play in this game. We don't know. Well, I guess we'll get a little bit of clarity. But I thought that there was maybe going to be a vacancy in the Waratahs loosewood trio for that spear tackle. How that wasn't a red card, I do not know.
Yeah, that was bad.
That was ridiculous. Well, it was just a bad refereeing decision. It's just inconsistent. I mean, you can debate how the intent or whatever about what actually happened, but what happened was a red card. That's what qualifies as a red card, and I don't know if the ref just bottled it or what happened, but I think he would be the only person in the ground that didn't think it was a red.
I know. No, that was pretty crazy. So Jed Holloway was dropped in quite a few leagues last week, going from game week 1 to game week 2. He was dropped in about 9% of leagues, so as you said, go and have a look to see if one of those leagues is your leagues, because he won't be too far away.
Yeah, and I wasn't crazy about him coming into the season because of the change from lock to loose forward as far as his designation in the game. But then, as you pointed out, well, how many loose forwards can score a hat-trick? The kind of hat-trick that he scored, running from sort of 40, 50 metres out. And I thought, yeah, you're absolutely right. So, regardless of what position he's in, he's somebody that's worth owning.
Indeed. Speaking of crazy refereeing decisions, let's jump onto the Jags-Lions game. So let's start with Sanchez. I think we mentioned it last week, didn't we? How he obviously sees something a little bit different when he looks in the mirror. He sees a 7-foot bloke who's absolutely stacked, because he the old red mist descended a little bit. He was trying to make up for his poor kick, and he was just obviously wanting it too much. Did you see this game? I saw highlights, so I didn't see what you're talking about. So, he put a little chip through, and sometimes it's a little bit different than the spear tackle you were talking about. This was a really it was an unusual collision. So, Sanchez, effectively what he did is just dived straight at the head of the player who was trying to catch the kick, but it didn't do it like it normally did it, and it looked like he was kind of going for the ball or not, but effectively what had happened, he just cleaned him out straight into the head. And now it should have been a red card. It was a red card all day. But because it was such a bit of an unusual collision, sometimes the refs can't slow things down and break it down as clearly as they want and apply the law. And I just think this was the case. And clearly the Sanzar agree with me, because he's got a hearing tonight, I believe, actually, in a couple of hours. So they cited him, which means it was a minimum red card offence. I suspect he'll be out for probably 2 or 3 weeks for that. It was pretty bad, especially when Taufua gets a yellow for that push punch, and Sanchez didn't get anything here. But anyway, he was pretty good. He won a lot of their matchups pretty late on. And he looked back to the kind of Sanchez that we saw in the 2015 World Cup for the Pumas. He was kind of pulling the strings. And
yeah, well, the things that caught my eye were a couple of passes that he came up with close to the line. One was a face pass to the winger that scored. Another one where he just sort of swerved and lent the body and just opened up a hole for someone that was running off the hip. Just little touches that were just class.
Yeah, that's right. And he is. He's a touch of class. I think if you have Sanchez, though, you're going to have to prepare for Plan B. So all of those fly halves we talked about in the last half hour, 45 minutes, you're going to have to want to get some of that action as well, because I can't see this going any other way but Sanchez having suspension this week at least. Ball carriers. So Matera and Tomlinson Lasana, very, very strong. They both look really, really good. Matera in particular. Obviously, Asana got his yellow card, which knocked his points as well. But those two are really strong ball carriers. And with Senatore in there as well, that's a pretty potent back three. What do you think of the Lions front row? What are you doing with them if you're in? Are you trying to trade for?
Yeah. I mean, when they get back home, I think they'll be sort of back in business. And they haven't been bad. I mean, up until this week, I think. I'm just having a quick look at it now, but I believe they were right up there. They're fourth.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're not going badly, not at all.
I think there's a view that potentially, obviously, where we had ranked them, that they're expecting a little bit more, but it will come. And a lot of it is coming down to Kutsia starting at the hooker at the moment, and it is a matter of how much time Malcolm Marks gets on the field, because he scores tries and sets up, defenders beaten, line breaks, all that kind of stuff. He does it all, and does it. They got their points. The front row got their points because of Marks coming on, scoring that try, and he's done it for 2 weeks in a row now. So I'm dangling a few carrots out there. I think there may be a couple of folks that are a little bit nervous, but I don't think you've certainly got any reason to be nervous. Anything more from this game?
No, just I guess we can expect Where are the Lions? Who are they playing this week? Are they playing the Reds?
Yes, they are.
And that would be in Brisbane, I assume?
Yep.
Right. So I think it's safe to assume that the guys that didn't go on the tour are going to be joining up with them, or you think they'll stay at home? Because we're looking at Yankees and Van Rensburg and Mapu.
It's a good question. Yes, you'd think certainly Van Rensburg, because it was a funeral for him. Yankees, maybe not, because it was a kid for him, wasn't it? Mapo was rested, or was it the other way around?
No, Mapo was rested / rehabbing, they said, but I think it was basically a resting.
Photo shoot.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I think everyone I would expect, aside from Yankees, but there is still a good chance that it will be him as well. So yeah, it's a really good point to note whether they'll come back on tours. I'm pretty sure that game is at Brisbane. I'm sure the listeners will point it out to us. Okay, so the other 100%, anything more from the game week before I reveal the other 100% owned players and sign off?
No, I don't think so, no.
So obviously one of these players is going to change. Milner-Skudder, he's 100% owned. TJ Perinara, 100% owned. Julian Severe. And this one blows my socks off. I love it, but it blows my socks off. Ryan Crotty is 100% owned in every league. How's that?
Yeah, I think the thing is, though, that the players that didn't make this list, some of them are sort of 99.9, right?
Oh, yeah,
so
it's
all relative. It's just one particular league where, maybe something random happened and somebody said, that's all it takes for someone to not make that 100, obviously. So it's...
Yeah, no, there's a massive list of all of the Naholo Ioannis in that kind of 99% range. I was just more astounded that Ryan Crotty is even in the same breath with any of these guys. It's just amazing. All right.
So I did just one quick one. So it's obviously the theme of the evening, but where would you rate Garth April in respect to fly halves that are owned? So say the Hawaras of the world, and I'm just trying to think who else is in that. So honestly, John O'Lance is now he's on a bye anyway, so.
Right. Good question. So right now, if without knowing if he was starting or not, I still would have him lower than those guys, only because I know those guys are going to start for 100%. If Garth April was assured of starting, I would probably have him at the same kind of level as Hawara, as an example, because the Waratahs Brumbies is usually a fairly tight affair, and I expect the Sharks to go quite well this weekend. I think if you could guarantee that Garth April is going to start, I would put him higher. But right now, as we speak, we kind of talked about it. I'm not 100% sure. I'm leaning that way, but I'm not 100% sure. So I wouldn't like to say he's above those kind of fly halves that we were grabbing in that kind of 6, 7, 8 round.
I guess I'm thinking that if you're someone whose number one is out, and maybe it's Sanchez or maybe it's Cruden or somebody or Lima, and your number is April more valuable than your number two? If your number two is Hauer or Lance, or if you've been rolling with, say, Cripps or Cronje or Zalinga as your number two, like is April still worth picking up?
Yeah.
To hold 3 fly halves.
Well, that's the point, I guess, with Lambie. Lambie, you're probably not going to get hold, but your question is relevant when you talk about Cruden or Sanchez or these types of players, because you are going to hold someone else. If I had Hawara on my bench, I probably wouldn't. No, I wouldn't waste my waiver wire on it. Looking at a little bit further down, if it was Cripps, yes, I would. Zalinga, no, I'm happy with Zalinga. John O'Lance, I'm happy with him as well. Lionel Cronje, happy with him. Robert Dupree, I'd probably put him over Robert Dupree and Jean-Luc Duplessis, only because I don't really know which way they're going to go in those two.
Sure.
But yeah, no, it's a valid question, because that's what most managers are faced with. Is he better than my backup fly half? What about yourself? Clearly, you said you haven't been afflicted, so you haven't had too much time to go over what your options are or what your options would be, but what do you think?
I agree with you about the Stormers. I think it's probably. I think I might actually think about him over John O'Lance. John O'Lance on a bye this week hasn't exactly set the world on fire.
Sure.
I think that April is going to be probably a better number 2 than John O'Lance is, at least for the next, whatever it is, 8 weeks or something. So I'd probably go him over there.
And you'd drop Johnny Lance? You'd cut him?
I think I probably would.
For April?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right, cool. A quick reminder of how you can contact us. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft. That's Fantasy RUG Draft, or drop us a mail at support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. Again, there's a lot of managers that prefer to do it that way as opposed to putting it on social because it keeps away from the prying eyes of the rest of the league. Also, jump on the Fantasy Rugby Draft Hall of Fame group. There's a lot of good stuff going on there. Injuries, suspensions, who do I start? Those types of questions. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
Hey, just going back to Garth. No, I'm kidding. No.
LT Rapido.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support and what a